Good evening, this is Sam, Real Love Guitars Shed Workshop, and I'm going to start off by introducing you to tonight's guitar, which is the vintage Thomas Blug Signature Series, and I'm going to give you a little flyby. So what have we got? Well, we've got a Strat shaped guitar in the nice neighbours in the vintage made by the JHS vintage people, and that's the Trevor Wilkinson backed or inspired guitar lines or brands or series or whatever you call them. Anyway, so this is a full width Strat body in a kind of relic finish, and it's interesting. I've read different people talk about this, and they talk about how smooth the relicing is. Actually, you can feel the kind of cut edges, the scratched edges here. Maybe that's deliberate, but so it's like it's been scratched rather than worn. Anyway, so you've got a twin cutaway Stratocaster style thing, a full width. You've got 3 Wilkinson WVR or something single coils, and these got staggered poles, and they sound great, really hyper real almost. I keep using this expression, but it's like, imagine if somebody built an algorithm to sound Stratish and then turned it up to 12. That's the kind of sound these things make. So they actually sound more Strat than most Strats you ever hear, which I think is quite interesting. I like them. They're very playable. What you've got on this thing is you've got a sort of I'm not sure with this finish. It's a copy of Thomas Blug's Strat, but what I don't quite know is what this is meant to be. You can see it's kind of painted on in almost stripes, and I don't know whether it's meant to be. Maybe that's what he did. I don't know the story behind the guitar, so maybe that's what he did, eh? But you've got volume, tone and tone with a push and let go on the last one. This switches in a hum cancelling dummy coil under the bridge, so I'm told, and I haven't really heard the difference it makes. You can hear it kicking in just as an electrical sort of noise or sound, but I don't really get to. I haven't heard the cancellation, the hum cancelling business going on at all. So what we've got here is actually we've got a very chunky neck. Now this neck is not like the vintage V6 Strats, but it is much more like the AV6 Strats, one of which I had, which was the advanced V6 or AV6 advanced series. And this has got quite a chunky, I would say, a deep C profile. It's very round, and it's got a very dark rosewood. It's not quite ebony coloured, but it's nice and dark, and it's distinctively dark. And same with the AV6 as well. I like it as a neck. It's quite big to hold. Feels quite wide, although it isn't particularly wide. It feels it. And on the end we've got the vintage style headstock with the modern vintage style, or the Encore stroke vintage style headstock, which is a perfectly good thing. It's sort of Strat like, but without running into problems. And then you've got these sort of aged, rusted, well, painted, looks like somebody's bled all over them, tuners, sort of given a bit of weathering. And I find, for me, this is a little bit on the yellow or the vintage amber side, and it looks like what you get when you're making your own guitar at home, as I've done, and you overdose on the vintage amber lacquer, so it goes a bit sort of orangey, as you can see. There we have the Trevor Wilkinson stuff on the back there, which is quite usual, normal on all of them. Then we got sort of a worn, rubbed, faded out, tired look on the thing there, and then we've got a full weight bridge, and then we've got the relicing away, and there's no back plate, and the relicing to the back paintwork as well. So overall this has raised quite a bit of interest. Oh, and the tremolo is currently set in a floating position, which we'll redo, or we'll make sure, actually if it's enough, we'll leave it as is. So this guitar has aroused a lot of interest on the Real Love Guitars Facebook page, and it seems very popular, and it's not cheap. I think you can probably find one for about $350, $360, $370 GB pounds, and so it's not cheap, but it is a nice player, and straight as Drew has sent it to me as is. I've enjoyed playing it. I spent about, I don't know, half an hour trying it out, and it is a great feel. But then I like the original or the other AV6 Stratocaster too. So it's quite chunky. It's heavier than your vintage, your usual vintages, and it's heavier than your Encores normally are. And I'll just sort of see if you can hear the tones, but I'm never managed to play anything. Somebody said I should learn to play something for these videos, and it's true, I should, but I never do, so it's just real life. Sorry. Okay, so the thing that struck me about this playing wise is that's where we go to the bridge pickup. So the first thing that struck me is that unlike quite a lot of other Strats that often just sound trebly and cutting in the bridge position, this has actually got a bit of twang to it, even in the bridge. So it's not just picking up the sound, it's putting a bit of colour onto it, which I quite like. Now I can't really seem to make it replicate any can't make any circuit noise. It's as quiet as anything, with or without the circuit switched in. So very quiet, but that could be this room, who knows. It's stayed in tune since I last touched it, which is great. Now Drew has got 8s on here, so what we get out of it is easy to bend, and you can even do one-fingered bends, which is quite handy. It might even convert me to 8s before we know what's happened. So then anyway, we go into sort of second position, which is beautiful sort of mid position. Nice in between position, middle, that middle position is kind of, it's not really a good way of describing it because it's very subjective, but to me that is about as Strat-like as most Strat copies get in the neck position, but this is in the middle position. So if I were to get that tone out of a neck position, on most Strat copies I'd be happy. But then we go up into the next one. Out of tune, sorry, but there we go. And then we go into the neck position. So, which is very tubey. Just give you an idea of the tones. So incredibly stratty, and it is a bit like you know, when somebody has a choice to make a copy like this, it's almost like Trev Wilkinson had said to the designers, look, just take the Strat settings and make them go up to sort of 12 on each pickup, and give me back what you've got. And actually what it makes is this fantastic, just overblown Strat sound, and you get, so in a way you get more Strat tone for your money than you would do with you know, your Mexican Strats or even your USA Strats, because it's hyper stratified, if you get what I'm trying to get across. Now it's funny enough, I'm not just making this up, because I got the same impression, but when I was playing and tweaking the Encore Blaster series, and they have a set of pickups in them called Guitar Tech from the same people, the Trevor Wilkinson crowd, and the Guitar Tech pickups, the body didn't feel so great. It's a very plasticky, bubblegummy feel, and the neck wasn't anywhere near as nice, but the pickups had that similar sort of, I kind of described it the other day on Facebook as if it was a high dynamic range of sound. So it was the sound equivalent of the picture HDR on your camera when all the kind of contrasts are brought up and the saturations dialed up. And that's what this feels like, these pickups feel like to me. So it kind of feels like that's what the vintage, the John Hornby Skews, Strat Wilkinson, Strat Encore are doing with the Blaster Guitar Tech pickups, the cheaper the one up from the bottom range of the Encores, which are now made in China and so on and so on. It feels like that's part of the family tradition, and to me these are a nice version of that, and actually they work in, they're more accentuated. The Blaster pickups, the Guitar Tech pickups, single coils, seem to me they've got that same sort of sugar, bubblegummy, candy hit, but they don't have the richness of these, and these are a nice, I believe these are Alnico 5 pickups, magnets as well. Anyway, the interesting thing about these is that I find them very difficult to locate outside of, and other people have said this, outside of these guitars. So the problem is that there isn't one vintage equipment or one John Hornby Skews or one Wilkinson shop. It doesn't seem like it. Everybody seems to deal a bit of this stuff, and what it also appears is if you manage, I tracked down a set of these, apparently these, obviously without the die on them, but I tracked down a set of these that were retailing, somebody was selling in Norway, from Norway, for 60 quid, and in fact he was the only person on eBay selling these at all, and he was selling some individual ones and some and a set, and the individual ones were going for about 25 quid or 30 or something, and then 60-ish for a set. Now the thing is, with these pickups or Wilkinson single coils, then you can find other Wilkinson single coils that will cost about £30 a set, which aren't these. I believe they're ceramic ones, but there's no kind of, it's pot luck if you can find them, and then so they're not the same, and then you also find another set of Wilkinson pickups that look like those other ones, the mid-range 30 quid ones, but are made in China and supplied from China, and they're called licensed by Wilkinson. And actually, by the time you get there, you don't even begin to know whether you're getting anything that's even similar. And the only real way is to buy one set of the 60 quid, if you can find them, a set of the bog standard 30s, and a set of the Chinese ones, and do some sort of back-to-back, and I haven't got the time to do that. It's a pity, because I'd like to get hold of this set and see how they sound in, for example, you know, one of these Encore jobbies over here, which I'm refurbishing. Anyway, that done. Sorry if that was a bit of a detour, Drew, for your guitar. But anyway, so what's the brief on this one? Well, as I said, I picked this up, played it for half an hour or so, and just enjoyed it straight off. Probably enjoyed the 8s anyway, because they're just light and can go mental and bend all over the place. I enjoyed it because it's got a familiar feeling neck to my lovely AV6, which I eventually sold, but I would buy another at a drop of a hat. I enjoyed it because of the tones of these pickups, and I enjoyed it because of the radius of the neck, which looks to me like a 725, or at biggest a 9.5, but it's quite curved, and I'll check it out when we've got the things. I can't remember. I looked at the specs and I can't remember what it said. But anyway, I enjoyed it for all those reasons, and it stays in tune. It doesn't have split post tuners. It has the normal, you know, hold tuners. But everything about it was nice to play. And so what was interesting for me is what Drew wants doing to it, and because in one sense it's pretty good as is. The action over the first fret is only a tiny bit higher than I would have it, so that's kind of good. Makes it comfortable to play. The action at the last fret isn't hugely high either, but there's a little bit we can take out. And Drew described it to me, he'd like it, the action lowering a bit, and he described it to me that when he was bending, he felt like his fingers were just getting a little bit caught under the strings at this top end. So if we can get them down a little bit more, it will sort of help to prevent that happening. So we'll do that, and there is a bit of room, maybe 0.5, 0.75 at the most, to take it down. He wants the nut changing for a bone one, this is a graphite thing. So we'll go for a bone, which kind of colour-wise probably fits the guitar as well, if not better. But then there is one other thing that I've noticed on here, which is a bit odd, but we'll see what we can do with it. Is the misalignment, what appears to be a bit of misalignment on these strings down the neck, and I think you can probably see. I know it's all bendy in this camera view, but you can probably see how relatively close to the edge that the bass, the low E, is compared to how much room we've got in the real estate of the high E. Now obviously we don't want to overdo that if we are able to kind of reposition the neck slightly. I think it's, when you look at it dead on, I would say that there's maybe between the very edge of the string, it's a little bit out. It's more out at this end. Obviously it's always more extreme at this end, and I would be tempted to look and see if we can just reposition it slightly. It isn't a major amount, but it's enough just to get this neck tilted a little bit. Now that might require a shim. I prefer to do it without shim, which would be probably easier achieved by slacking the bolts off, leaving one in as a sort of a pivot, and then just levering it into place, putting a second one in, checking it for alignment, and then tightening it all up. That's a perfectly good way of doing it, and the neck's quite happy with that. Once it's all tightened back up, it will stay where it is. So I'll take a look at that. But also what we'll do is we'll take the action down to as low as it can go without without running into any problems. So just a quick observation. What I'll do is I'll take some measurements as I go through. Now I need to readjust my capo here because it's such a big, deep, chunky neck. Just going to have a quick look at what we've got in terms of relief, and I'll get my measuring device out. So I suppose all told there isn't an awful lot to do on this, and I've already said to Drew that because it's pretty well, compared to most guitars that come through, it is pretty well set up already comparatively. I mean, it's not extremely high up here, it's not ridiculously high over the first fret, and in terms of pound for pound feel difference, this area here will make the biggest feel difference, and secondly this here, and so if this is way out at this end, just by correcting the nut slots, it not only cures the intonation stroke tuning issues at this end with notes going sharp, it makes the guitar easy to play, obviously, but also then for the owner it feels quite substantially different from how it did before. So that makes the biggest kind of change of how it feels. Reductions of playing action at this end will obviously improve the playing feel of it, but pound for pound they don't make quite as profound a difference as the adjustments down here. So it follows that if a guitar comes in that's pretty well okay down here, then tiny tweaks down here aren't going to make so much. I mean, Drew isn't going to feel so much of a difference down this end. It will be slightly improved in here, but I've let him know that it's one of those things where if it's fairly well set up, the amount of improvement isn't quite, or the change in the way it feels isn't as drastic as it can be. It's a little bit higher than I'd probably want there, but yeah, it's not as drastic as it could be. Now just checking this out, we're about 0.25 of a millimetre at the middle point of the neck. Actually 0.2. So relief at 0.2, that's not too bad actually. It felt okay before. So I'm just making a note. Relief of 0.2 millimeters. Just check, just for interest. I'd like to have, on a guitar like this, I'd like to know what things are before we get going, because then at worst we can return back to what those settings are so it feels familiar. Okay, so on the low E it's just 0.4, so I'm just going to write it down here. low E, A, D, G, B, E, and then we go first fret 0.4 on the A. I think it's about 0.5. Again, or just a fraction higher than I would personally set it, but nothing there. Just by looking, I can tell nothing there is in the territory of tuning problems. I've referred to 0.5 or 0.6. I refer regularly or frequently. I refer to this the issue, the problems that you get when you have a first fret action that's too high. I habitually refer to it as a so no 0.5. I habitually refer to it as an intonation problem, and it's probably not the correct term. That's 0.4. Yeah, so it's probably more correctly a tuning issue, but I don't know. Actually, I'm kind of, I could be argued either way. It's more likely 0.3. That's not bad then. Yeah, so whether it's technically an intonation issue or an intonation issue or a tuning issue, so that's 0.25. Let's do 2.5. So 0.5, 0.2. So they're inconsistent. That's the point here. 0.25. Let's go to the G. Squeeze over from that side. So it's over 0.3. Well, just on 0.3. Yeah, whether it's tuning or intonation, it's kind of less important. But somebody commented on a video going, you're wrong, you're all wrong. You have to set the intonation first before you can set the intonation at this end or cure the intonation at that end. And it's completely wrong. They're independent of each other, as I tried to point out. But okay, so 0.2, but barely 0.2. So there's an interesting mix of playing actions over the first fret there to start off with. Let me just put this out of the way. Okay, turn the heating off for a minute so I don't boil. Let's put this back on, tune it up. And then having a look at the playing action on the last fret, which I'll again mark up for each of these just for interest's sake. I need a bright light in here, a brighter light. Okay, but I can see it. Alright, so the last fret on the low E, it's 2mm. Again, we can lose half a millimetre there. So it goes 2mm, 1.6, 1.5, 2mm, 1.6, 1.5. Come on, light. This is 1.5 or 1.6 again. Just about 1.5. So these appear to be the same all the way across, which is slightly different how I would do it. And this is 1.6 or 1.7 on the far top E. So I would have a gradient down there personally, from the low bass notes to the high notes. So there is a bit of action adjustment room to do, and again that will slightly change the radius of these strings, because at the moment they're not quite following the fret. Because if you were to map these numbers here over the fret, and you know, sometimes people say to me, how do you don't use a radius gauge, how do you know? Well, if you think about it, if that's our fret there, what I do is I go plot the first one, I go 2, second 1.6, a bit like that, next 1.5, bit like that, next one 1.6, bit like that, next one 1.5, bit like that, 1.5, and so on, right? And that gives me, I'm measuring upwards from there, and so you can see that I'm mapping up from the fret, or the space between the string and the fret. And what it tells me, because of the unevenness of these numbers, what it tells me is that Drew's playing radius is not exactly the same as the fret radius. Okay. Now, if somebody said to me, well, you know, how do you set the playing radius, the string playing radius, to the same? Well, I would make it the same by ensuring all of them were exactly the same height, if that was important to make it the same, exactly the same playing radius. But in fact, I don't do that. What I tend to do, since it seems to work, is I tend to do this. Okay, so we get this playing radius that is exaggerated, that is the same radius but tilted over. Alright, so it's kind of the radius just tilted one way. Okay, so it opens it up a bit at one side, but it's, in a sense, it's if you put this curve up one end, it would be the same shape. Anyway, so that's how I set the strings to the guitar's radius without using one of those funny little radius guides that, of course, StewMac and everybody else is perfectly happy to sell you. That was my phone doing something. Let me just check. Yep, all good. Tim Peake is off to space again. Right. Okay, so here we go. I've got my measurements. I've got my relief. I'm going to leave it as is. I can see that I can lower the strings a little bit and change this all the way as we get down, and I'm going to do that in a second. Now, just as a thought, and what I haven't brought out, I left it in the house. Yo. Okay, I just quickly need one of them wonderful stick things that makes the thing sting. And I'm going to try and find one. Oh, come on, give me a vintage one, or whatever they're called. Can I just a Wilkinson one. Save me going all the way in the house. Wilkinson one. Okay, that's good. It's the equivalent of, it doesn't have a thread on it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this. It's nice and springy. Now this is really cool. It's a good example. Now we did yesterday, I did Ed's V6, vintage V6, and judging by feeling at that, the springs he's got on that V6 are way heavier than the springs on this, and it seems to be the reason, and I'm not very good at why the mechanics of the springs are, but it seems to me why this is a much more flexible tremolo. Could well be. Hey, look, it's got a screwy thing. How cool is that? Seems to be why this is much more usable than the one on that V6. So to make it more playable, I'd need to remove and change. It sounds like I'd need to change out the springs. I could have misunderstood that, so anyone was free to tell me I'm completely wrong on that. Okay, so I'm going to leave the tremolo as is, and I'm going to take the action just from where it's standing right now, so I'm not going to do any more adjustment to the trem. Because I'm going to replace with 8s, this trem is going to go back into place when the time is right. Now what I want to do here is I want to take this one down to 1.5 at its most. Now in doing so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if you like, I'm going to challenge this, challenge the frets underneath to make them, we're going to see whether they can cope with playing at this low an action, and if they can't, what will show up pretty quickly is going to be the we'll hear chokes and buzzes and so on. So the next one, I could do this, I'm going to do this by eye to begin with. So I take the next one and I wind it down a bit. And it's only by eye to begin with, and then I'm going to adjust everything else accordingly. Now I know that these further on are a fair bit higher than they need to be, or higher than I would have them, I should say. So they're going to come down a fair bit. And then this last one is going to go down 1/2 mil as well. Sorry. Okay, so there's my sort of what's the word? Eyeballed version. And so the thing to do now is just to double check them. So we've got 1.5. We've got again 1.5. I suppose we need to be just a fraction less. Make it follow this gradient we talked about, and it's just a little bit too much down. Tiny tweaks. 1.5, 1.6. That's so tiny. 1.6, not what I want. Tiny tweak downwards again. So you can see it's a little bit of a fiddle. Then we go to just under, that's about right, that one. Then we go to a bit higher. Just over 1 or 1.2-ish. Now I'm running at 1.5 there. It's very difficult to get it so low so accurately. What have we got? I do need a bigger light here. Okay, so that's, yeah, that's about right. That's a bit too low. We want to come down to about 1.3 here. There we are, 1.3, and down a bit from this one to 1, just dead on 1. Okay, so there we have it. The difficulty always with a trem, a floating trem, is to take a single note and tune it. It's not very accurate to do it that way. But if it's close, you'll be alright. Right, so now we've got it at the lowest action I think it can reasonably go, and remembering that Drew wants to lower the action a bit to stop his bends, fingers going under. Now what we see straight away now is that we've run out of, we're choking out on the bends here. That's working. So let's try. Okay. A little bit hizzy. Struggling a bit. Struggling. Struggling a lot. which is probably why that one was cranked up to 2. So there's always a little giveaway on this. So you say to yourself, why was that one at 2 and everything else was at about 1.5? And that's why you can hear it. Put this down to 1.5 and it's pretty dead. So as I say, there's always a factory imperfection, I suppose. The truth is the frets are never precise when they come from the factory. They can't be. It's just not. It's not possible in the process. I can't make them precise. I think a 1 in 25 refrets or whatever it is I've done has been absolutely perfect from the moment I did it. But that was pure luck. Every other one you have to do a bit of fret leveling. The same applies here. Now. This is going to be messed around a little bit now, because what I have to do is, normally I would drop the strings off, paint up the things and get on with fret leveling, but this one's slightly different, because now what I've got to do is drop the strings off and I've got to work this nut out of here and replace it. Now, depending on the width of this neck, I may have to make a custom nut at this point. I'm a bit short on spares anyway, but it's also potentially a little bit wider than the bog standard Strat nut, because I seem to remember these JHS necks being feeling quite wide. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get myself a little bit of green garden wire, because I want to slack all of this off. Actually, that's a bit too slack. Slack all of this off enough to just pull these things sneakily out of the way. But in such a way that we can use them again afterwards. So to work on the nut, I do need them tucked away. So look at my green wires. It's one of those spools of wire that one day got cut in the wrong place, and so there are about 5 different ends going on here. Okay, so like I said, first part of this is I'm going to gently, I'm going to get a bit of tape as well, because I want to just protect things as I go. So I'm going to just heave these strings off to one side, and I'll do that just here by, actually I won't do that first. What I'm going to do, I can make this work, I'm going to get a bit of tape that doesn't immediately coil into or come off immediately. Double it up a little bit. So I've either got this stuff here, which is old but quite, I say quite sticky, it isn't sticky at all, but it's enough to protect this thing. It's either old and sticky but flawed and it won't come off the roll, or it's the newest stuff which I bought deliberately to be low tack for doing the fingerboards, which doesn't really stick very well to anything. So never the tape you need when you need it, but if in doubt, err on the side of low tackiness if you have to. So what I'm just doing here is I'm just kind of, because these strings are going to pull down the side a little bit, I'm just going to put a bit of tape on there so it allows me to do this pulling out the way, twisting them together just to hold them in place. And then they're out of the way of the nut and I can put them back on, but there's no risk of them, they're not scratching the edge here, although they are touching the paper. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a deep breath, and using my soon to be repaired, because I'm going to get some resin in here, resin epoxy. Now I'm going to use the Chris Barker special, and I'm going to attempt to just break the supery gluey seal, and it's quite a tricky thing to do this, because on all Strats you've got this little platform of rosewood and it's pretty fragile actually, all said and done. So there's a lot of risk, or high risk, of if you just bash away in this direction to unseat the glue, you can run a risk of it kind of coming off. Now this, thankfully, is doing what it should do. Thanks Chris, it worked this time. Oh, it doesn't always work, but it's not the tool, it's just the way it's been glued in. Next problem, you've got to find the thing. Right, so this is This is it's a curved, what do you call it, nut it's got one of those little feet in the middle, so it basically sits, it's a curved nut that's designed quite cleverly to sit either on a curve, in which case you file off this little tab here and then you sit it on the curve. Sometimes they're made with a curve, or in this case it's really designed to sit on a flat slot like this, in which case that little foot makes those 3 points there are on a flat line. So what we've got is we've got this thing here, which is, it's graphite. It's quite hard. It's not bad substance, but it's not quite as it's not as easy to work with as is bone. So we've got one that is, I think it's probably 42. That's what I think I saw. It's actually a bit more than that. It's very close to 43. It's 42.8. 42.8. Now I'm pretty certain that's a little bit longer. 42.8mm nut. Just making a note for my own purposes. Great thing about a whiteboard, of course, is you can bin it all later. Now I've got, I'm going to tip this out a minute while I dig around and see what we do have left over. I've got a few blank nuts. They'll be taller. That's the right width. It's kind of nice sitting in there, and I would say that is just about spot on. Actually, that's pleasant, because it isn't always the case. Sometimes I get a little bit of overhang, and so we go 42.3, 42 point, depends which part you touch on it, 42.2. So we're just under half a mil short of the full length, but it really does, that runs to the edge. I'm comfortable with that. So the black one, actually, funnily enough, the black one just sticks out a tiny bit. This white one, bone one, fits precisely perfectly, which is great. So there's my nut. Now these happen to be left-handed nuts, funnily enough, which means at this point in time, if I turn it around that way with the bass string there, it means a couple of things. It means it's slightly chamfered, beveled this way. No problem at all, because when I put this in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work the slots, and then once the slots are down, they'll be quite low in this material, then we'll just take off the excess with a file and or a Dremel, and then what we'll have is we'll reshape the back of it so that it slopes that way. The point is, even if we left the front slope or the top sloping this way, the slots will always be sloping in the correct direction, but rather than having it look a bit odd, I'll make sure that it also slopes in the right way. Now what I've got here, just run into a bunch of strings, which is not a good place to have them. Spare strings! I've got so many sets of sacrificial strings, which is pretty cool. Okay, so what I've got is I've got my what used to be a fret rocker, still is, but I use it for cleaning out nut slots, and it's just about the right, exactly the right size, and it helps me just ensure that any previous gluey stuff is just cleaned out, and it does it nicely without stressing this piece of wood here. Now I'm not going to do it much further than that, because there is you can't help it that it starts to widen the slot more than we'd really want it. So what I really want to have happen here is I need the corners of the slot to be cleaned out, so that the nut will sit cleanly in that right angle at the bottom. That's very difficult to do if it's already been glued in place, because it tends to have some crud sitting there, and so what I usually find is, if I can just, I think I can in this case, if I can just get into that, get this in a vertical position, if I can just get into this, right into that angle there, and you can see it, hear it and see it, cleaning out that little bit of excess glue in a way that squares off the slot. And another way of doing it is to just get in there and just kind of just chip off anything that's rounding off the corner, because it's that sort of gunge in there that stops the new nut sitting cleanly. And then we'll do the same thing this way by switching it, and thankfully this little slanted bit is just right to allow me to run it upright, so I can get this cleaning out effect without touching the other side of the whole thing, which is pretty neat. And then again, I just go in here and just chip out anything that's obviously obstructing the slot. I'd rather spend a bit of time doing that with working with this than too much time working with that. That tends to be a really good tool for the Les Paul nut because it's bigger and actually got a lot more room to wiggle around with. But in the case of the Strat nut, a little bit of careful work like this with the blade will be a better option. Okay, so that's not a bad fit actually. We're still a little bit off the totally square on the bottom there, but with some glue in there it will solve counter that problem, and we'll get it to sit nicely. So when I'm doing this, it's the corner or the angle I'm hoping to preserve. Or to clean, I should say. Okay. So as I say, it's not an airtight fit to begin with, but once we get those corners square and we get a little bit of glue in there, it'll sit upon that and then set nice and solid. At this point, we'll just run this through a couple of times just to make sure we've got as flat a surface as possible. Got loads of room, a spare height on the nut anyway, so we can afford to go as low as we want really. But I'm mainly concerned in just getting it as square as possible. But there's a limit to how much you can do basically. You can hear bits of crunchy glue in there, but like I say, without there's not a lot you can do. You can sort of run a couple of very fine screwdrivers down there just to chip off anything that's obviously standing up and getting in the way, and you can feel it right in the corner. There is some obstructing stuff, so I tend to, like you can see here, I tend to end up with a variety of little tools doing service in this part. I want the nut to be able to sit tidily into a right angle. And that, I think, is about as good as I'm going to get. What you'll also find is if there's a tiny bit of raised material, I'm just looking at this actually, I can see where the glue has come out from whoever, in the factory where they put that nut in. You can see it's just run a little bit. Anyway, this is, I think, realistically, apart from a little bit of sort of gentle additional scraping and moving about, this is probably as good as it's going to get. And then just like I say, just trying to get any little sticky up bits here with this tool. And then I'll get some glue and we will be in place. Now when I'm done, this will be filed down to quite a low level, so it won't obviously stick up like that. Now, in some ways, it's quite it would be nice to take some of this down first. So it would be nice to throw it on the floor first of all. So what we can do, just to save some of the cutting, let's get it the right way around. What we can do is we can push it into the slot and then we can draw onto it the level of the fingerboard. And what I know is we can measure the two, well, we can see the two things. Here we've got what looks like about 3mm above the fingerboard. Now obviously we know that the bottom of our slot is never going to be more than 0.4 above. Sorry, that's not true. It's not true at all, is it? I'll tell you what it's going to be. Let me tell you. I don't know if this is actually accurate enough, but let's just try it and see. Okay, let's call it 1.3mm. So I'll do a bit of clever calculation. 1.3 is the fret height. That's the fret height, and then I know that we've got a nut that needs to be that plus, excuse me, well let's go 0.5, that's pretty close, but let's go 1 just for fun. So 2.3. We'll call it 2.3 above this line. So we need, let's dial 2.3 in. So we've drawn a line where the fretboard is. Let's go to 2.3 on my gauge. Couldn't live without this gauge, I have to tell you. It's not a very expensive one, but by golly. So I need 2.3 above this, and actually judging by this we aren't far off that. So all that's really going to need to happen on this nut to get to the playing action we want in a minute is to mostly just take some off the ends. So we'll probably go down a little further on the ends, but actually it's not going to require as much digging down as I originally thought. So I'm not going to do any undercutting from the bottom, or else I'm going to find myself with too little nut room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my cocktail sticky world to drop some super glue in the bottom of there, and I'm going to lower this chap in right now. And the thing about all of this is we want this to run flush to the end. We don't want it sticking out anywhere, and then we want to look and make sure that in its flushness we aren't, but we want to make sure that the string spacing is good. Now as a result, what this might look like, a little bit of movement in there, I might need to shim it. That's often you find with these things that the I will get a little piece of very fine paper. What you often find is that a black nut, whatchamacallit nut, graphite nut, can actually be a little thicker than the bone ones. Don't know why, but it can be the case. So what I'm just going to do here, this is still got some movement in it. I'm going to wiggle it out for a second. I'm going to make myself a very quick plastic shim which can sit towards the front of this. And it doesn't need to be tall, it needs to be only as tall as that thing. There we have it, very very thin indeed. I wonder if I can stick that to the front. Will it hold? Typically it won't. Right, let's get a tiny dab of glue. Just want to just stop it, hold it in place, because it's got a little bit of forward movement, tiny little bit. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit on the front edge, apply this paper thin shim effectively, stay there. Oh, the neighbour's coughing. Oh God, it's awful. and then we go back in here like this, and with a bit of luck that will fit back in there. Now it's just thickened it out a little bit, and it's sitting in there nicely. Well, I say nicely, but it's actually raised up. It's raised up this little intended shim of mine. Let's recut it. It's even thinner than that. I might have to just clean out this in a minute, but so bear with me. I'm just going for the very thinnest shim in the world. Oh yeah, my neighbours are always ill. They always have problems with their coughing and their lungs. It must be awful, but I'm trying to cut this as thin as I can, but it is resisting my ministrations. Come on, off. Right, thin. Thank you. Now I'm going to just get the glue off the front and the back. Tap a tiny bit more on it. It's probably, I'm probably going to extreme unnecessary lengths here, but I like it to sit still to begin with. I don't like it to have any movement at all when I start off, so I'm just tacking this here shim to the front. If it behaves itself, it's really not doing it. We're working at small scale here that doesn't want to obey the laws of physics. Come on, just, oh for goodness sakes. Right, it doesn't want to sit there, so I'm kind of now working with glue that I just need to dig out for a minute. Start again. Oh dear. Honestly, they don't sound well. Bless them. Okay, so I've got this little shimmy piece in here, and I'm going to just pop in there for a minute. I'm going to see if it will stay where it's supposed to stay. Well, it will. So there's my shim. Let's put a little tack of, doesn't need much in the way of glue, to be honest. It needs a little bit at either end. But I need to lay it in there so it doesn't come out. There's one end. And there's the other. So stay put. Okay, so back to what I was going to say is when you place your nut, you do want it to be, has that gone in or has that pushed that out of the way? I don't want it pressing down. That's in place. Okay. Yeah, when you push your nut in, you want it to be flush to either end, but sometimes when you look at it, what they can do, it can leave you with a bit too much room on one or the other sides, and you don't want that. So sometimes you almost need to push it a bit to one side or the other, which isn't ideal in some ways because it's sort of not how it was made, and you end up with a little tiny gap on one side or the other. In this case, I think it's just about right. Okay, so there's my bits and pieces which can get lost. Thank you for that piece of plastic. Move these things out of the way. I'm going to keep this nut for future measurements. It's handy. And we'll leave that to dry, and then what I'll do is, next stage, is I will now get my nut slot cutting things out. Now this set here represents a set that I usually use for nines, hybrid nines, so there'll be plenty big enough for 8s. So the 8 ends up on a oh, actually no, you know what, these are extra slinky 38s. Okay, so I will choose a different set. So not quite, this would be a little bit over. I like to go over anyway, but this would be a little bit. So let's go 8 to 11. It's like a chance to use some different thingies. Could go 8 to 10, but we've got an 11, so let's go 8 to 11. Let's go 11 to, what do we got, 16, that's a bit of a big jump. Let's go 11, 13. Hello, 13. 11 to 13, it's always the one that's tipped around the wrong way. Let's go 14 to 17, I think we might do, 14 to 17. Let's go 22 to 26, I think, not 24. 22 to 26. We got a 26? I'm sure we had one. Yep, we do. 26. These are really light. 30 to 38. Oh, sorry, 30 will go 36, and then 38 will go 46, just to keep it on the chunky side. So that's a different run of things. It's not the usual set that we use. So, ooh, interest and difference. Right, I'm also going to use get a couple of my jeweler's thingamajigs, which help me to do some of the bulk work before I get down to using the files themselves. So here we go. This is the fun bit now. We're going to loosen off the strings, release the strings. I just want to say a quick hello to George in Piney Woods, Texas. Hope you're watching this, George, and thank you for your very kind mail or your message on Facebook. No, YouTube, that thing today. It's a pleasure for me to know that what we would call in the UK a senior citizen such as yourself are not only have taken up guitar or playing guitar, enjoying guitar at your age, but great to know that whatever I do is of interest to you and helps you understand how this stuff works. So what's happened, of course, is we need to now tune this back up. Of course it's way off, and at the moment the tremolo vibrato unit has gone backwards onto the deck, so we're going to need to do this tuning back up thing. I'll try and do it off an existing guitar. I'll tune in an existing guitar and use it as a reference. The reason why it's better to use an existing guitar as a reference point is because the vibrato unit on the Fender is constantly on the move. So if you tune one string, tuning that string puts the other ones out of tune. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up as my reference. Pretty good. Horrible crunchy tuners on these things, but there we have the reference tuning. So why is that not playing right? Is that out of its slot? Why, I do think it is. What's that doing? Get back in your slot, my friend. That isn't good. Sorry, 1 second. That's not nice. Get in there. Ah, thank you. Right. Better. So notice what happens to the tuning. So really, to get this back into tune, what you have to do is you have to best to work off the reference tuning. This thing's not sitting right, I don't like it. I'm going to have to take this one out. I don't like it, it's not sitting correctly at this end for my liking. Okay, quality control kicks in, boop, 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 stop, boop, 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 boop. I'll come back, I'll rework this. It's not sitting accurately. Sorry. It's not that simple to even put a nut in, can you believe? Okay, I'll stop the camera a minute because it's going to take a little while. So see you in a minute. Hey, I can't help but put this on. I'm doing this, I've reset the nut. And I'm also taking the opportunity to just reshape it while we're here. And I took the strings off, get them right out of the way so that we got free rein to do it. But I couldn't help but put our Donald and our Teresa on the on the radio because I couldn't put it off. Frankly, I had to hear their little press conferencey thing. And well, you know, I don't want to lose friends and as they say. Friends and influencing people and losing friends quickly, but it's not pleasing me, let's put it that way. But I have to also listen, so I don't want you to miss out on what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to do a couple of things. Well, I'm just going to put on the first and last string, because before I do anything else, before I start cutting this down, I want to realign this neck. So this is a good opportunity to do it. So I'm going to re-hook up the 8 and the top E and the low E. Interesting. Wow, that's amazing. These are easy lock tuners, but this is sunk so far that you couldn't use the easy lock bit if you tried. How weird. So, okay, maybe that's part of the Thomas Blug deal. Seems a bit weird to me that uses tuners that you can't actually use them in the manner for which Wilkinson is renowned, but hey. Anyway, I just can't help noticing Theresa May and, well, Trump certainly, but Theresa May avoiding any controversial questions to a point of meaninglessness. Okay, right. Not interesting dynamic at all. Right, so I will keep this going, but I'll just let you know what I'm doing. So you can see here we've got this misalignment. I need the neck to push, you know, that way a bit. It's got a little bit of movement anyway, but I'm going to push the neck that way. But obviously to do it, I need to loosen off the thing. So it's a bit of a pain, but I'm going to shove these strings carefully out the way for the time being, because I need to concentrate on one thing at a time, and there's no need to have these strings splashing around getting in the way. So it really helps to just tack them off so they're not interfering with things. Now, from that point, I also need to. This is LBC radio, but I'm sure that the YouTube police aren't going to hit me with copyright for it. You never know. Okay, so while I'm at it, there's not a lot of tension on anything, so I'm going to gently slack off these not screws at the back. Now I'm going to push that way, so I probably would want to leave this one as the pivot, okay, which is what I'll do, and I'll unhook the top of the other three, actually pretty much all together, and then the idea is I'll just try and get another, leave one in, slack it off, so we've got one very loosely in place. Then I will aim to put a second one, or the second one back in, to just hold it in place, and we'll re-look at the position of everything. And the idea will be, if I can then see that it's in position okay, we'll carry on from there and sync the others and get them tightened up. Now, I don't think, from everything I've read by the way, I don't think Thomas Blug copy actually is supposed to have the strings so far off alignment. I could be wrong, but I never saw it mentioned in any review. So if I have got that wrong, somebody's going to tell me pretty sharpish. Okay, so there we have our thing off, and I'm going to move the neck a little bit that way. Now technically, as I say, what we're looking to do is move it, and there's a lot of movement you can get in it, because but actually what I don't want is too much, but I do need, it may be that I need a little tiny shim to go in there to get this to work right, and that shim wouldn't be hardly much at all. And what I might look to do is get a little piece of what everyone else uses, which is scratchy paper, sandpaper. It might, actually, looking at this, might be a bit too thick, but I'll cut myself a little tiny square. It can't be raining. Surely. Sorry about the radio. I just can't bring myself not to listen. So I'm just taking this little piece here. It doesn't have to be huge. It just needs to be enough. I'm going to cut it with a square or clean edge if I can. It's interesting that when Theresa May was asked by Laura Kuenssberg what she felt about the relationship with Trump's, or America's relationship with Mexico, Donald Trump told her that Theresa May had more important things to think about that didn't involve questions about Mexico, or actually the question was about Mexico and Muslims being banned, and Mr. Trump said she had more important things that didn't concern that. So she basically, it was a signal not to have any opinion. I'm not sure she would have had anyway, but it's sort of, I don't know, find it quite worrying. But everyone's saying that Theresa May has to bite her lip on all kinds of things and make sure we Brits get this fantastic trade deal, because we are out on a limb otherwise, and we'll be in trouble if we don't. Okay, now I've got a perfect alignment there with my little shim, and it's a little sandpaper shim, which again factories often use. So I'm now going to just tack in the 4 bolts. Now any shim makes a slight gap, and there is a tiny opening up of the gap, but it's only what would happen if we physically reposition this and just let the bolts do the holding. So it's not really, the paper just sort of secures that gap. But this is going to now leave the strings aligned beautifully, equally down the neck. Okay, so just going to sort of hand tight, or gently tighten these, just to first off, and then wire. And then, if you have a look, that's where we've got to with that little shim. Okay, so it's actually nice now it's central compared to how it was before. I'm pleased with that. That's much better. Just checking it down there. Yeah. I always find that the bridge puts the nut, tends to put the high E closer to the outside edge than the low E. I don't know why they do that, but okay. I am okay with that. Just put this under a little bit more tension on the E string just to see it straighten up. Make sure we're okay with that. Now the only alternative to this, if I'm not happy with this, I could go back with a tiny bit lighter shim under there. So I'd use something like this here, which is, I'll cut one, it's barely any different. I'm just going to have a little look, and I might just out of instinct tells me I might just go with that. So I'm going to slack that off. Oh, you know what? No, let's get it under tension.
Mine's a little bit historic. I've been hanging on for about 40 minutes. But it was something you said all that way back, so it's probably watered down by now. But all it was that, when you referred...
We've got, what have we got? We've got, starting at the same place. I think we've gone fag paper, as they say, too much. I'm going to replace the shim with this one. Sorry, I'm naughty. I can't not listen to these people talking. So I'm just going to carefully take these off again. Again, no harm in doing this. Nothing's been done up tightly. And I'm going to use the bottom left one still as the pivot.
I could have said much worse things, John.
Yeah. So for those of you who are over in the States, this is the sound of some Cockneys, Londoners, ringing in to share their views on Theresa May and her bargaining position and what she's doing with the Donald, as they call, some people call him over here. Right, let's just push that one out and push this one in and just wiggle it home. Oh, hi Morris. So I'm hearing that the presenter has got a major problem with Donald Trump's position on women's sexual health issues, contraception issues. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I think Morris is going to come up and have a little hello. Okay, so I'm just going tightening these back up now and doing them gently so that the neck can relocate around and everything sort of comes in. Oh, this bloody wire. The neck pulls the plate into place. Tell me if that's too annoying, because I quite like having this just tonight. I've got this in the background because I need to hear the responses to May and Trump's little get together. Okay, let's have a look now. Okay, that's actually, I'm happy with that. That's not quite as far as it was before, but it gives the E back just a little bit more room, which I'm more comfortable with. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten these up manually. It pulls it all into place nicely, and again just hand tightened, really, nothing major. Okay, I'm happy with that. So that leaves me kind of back to where we wanted to be. Will I leave that on? No, I'll leave that on. That's no harm that being on. So back to this, I'm just going to take off. Oh no, I just realised I've got loads of cardboard outside that was going to put in the burner, and now it's getting rained on. So I'm going to try and untangle some of these strings. And you all right, Morris? Get them reloaded. But the problem is, this is the annoying bit, and you can't speed this up. The problem is, this is was going to be tangled up. Okay, let me think what I'm going to do next. So next, what I'm going to do, and I might just switch off the camera, I'm going to get these reloaded, and I'm going to cut the nut slots down and to where we were before. In fact, not where we were before. I'm going to even them out. Before they were quite uneven, although they were quite relatively low. None of them above. The highest one was 0.5, but I'm going to go down to 0.3 on every one of them. Which, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to go 0.2. Who knows? The lowest is 0.2 on the top E and the B. Right, got that one in. So yeah, I think 0.3 is probably the best bet. It's a compromise between all of them, but they are currently uneven, so they're not making a lot of sense at the moment. Right, so what I'll do is go back to the beginning. I'm going to go back to where we were a minute ago, which is loading up the strings, and then I'm going to tune it up using that method, taking a reference off the tuning off the other guitar that's already tuned up. And like I said, if remember, the reason I do that is because when you've got a floating tremolo or floating vibrato bridge, you can't do a relative tuning. You need kind of the true notes, otherwise it's not going to work. You just you keep going out of, you keep losing your reference point, because as the one string tunes up, the bridge lifts up and detunes the other ones, and so on and so on. So this is, I hate it. When you put on old strings, by the way, they have a tendency to dip down and want to try and scratch the hell out of the lacquer. So you have to be very careful that they're pointing upwards as you start to bite. So right, let's just get this one on, and then I'll switch off and come back when it's all loaded up, ready for the nut slots, and we'll go from there, and I can digest a bit more of this special relationship between the Donald and the Teresa unfolding in the US of A. A little chap with Morris who's over by the door looking like he wants to go out in the rain. I don't think so, Morris. Okay, see you in a minute. Hey, we get on, we carry on. Okay, so we're balanced up again on the vibrato unit, and so now what I'm doing is that's too flappy. We're heading for getting these slots down to the correct depths. So what I tend to do is I tend to go with the bottom three first. So I'm going to work off this one here and the D. So I'm going to get my little thingy. What do you call it? Thing. I'm lost for words today. I've got a headache as well. Okay, point 3 is the sort of median across all of these, really. So I'm going for point 3 as an action. I'm going to use the set that I've got chosen here, and I'm basically cutting backwards a little bit at an angle, and we'll see where we get. So these strings I've got on here are currently sacrificial strings, so I'm going to chop them off at some point. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing a bit of a cut, and I'm going to do a bit of a widening with this triangular file, because when I've got a fair bit of material to take off, I don't want to go down all the way with just one thin little file, because to begin with it'll end up just with the file getting trapped down. So I want to sort of do a combination of the diamond coated jeweler's file, just as a way of opening up the notch, and then at the bottom of the notch I'm going to do the rest of the work here with this correct nut file, and it's just the diamond, the triangular file is doing the sort of the heavy lifting bit. And then what happens is, once I've got the height exactly right, the first fret action the way I want it, then what I'll do is I'll come back after I've done the fret leveling and basically take off any excess material on the nut that doesn't need to be there, so that it looks really nice and low instead of jagged and like a set of teeth here. Now the angle you do on this, by the way, only needs to be backwards a bit. It doesn't need to be massive, and it's probably, on most guitars, it's dictated by how far the rosewood here sticks out behind the nut, because if it's too far back, you really don't have much of an angle available to you, whether you like it or not. So we're just about 0.3 there. I'll do a couple of little moves further, but as I say, the angle can't be too deep, because the wood's in the way, and I don't want to take a chunk out of that or a slice out of that. So still some fresh air there. I'll keep going. So on the radio there, Londoners, well not Londoners actually, people from the UK are responding and reacting to Theresa May's performance. We're just down on it, on the mark there. Okay, and so now we go on with next one. The reason I want these roughly at pitch is so that they sit properly into the slots. Okay. I'm not sure what people are saying, can't quite hear it, but not sure what the reaction to our Theresa May is at the moment. It's very difficult, you know, when there's clearly so much concern from, it's very polarised, this issue, like I've never seen before actually, between, you know, those who like Donald Trump as a politician or an individual and those who don't. And it's a very difficult one for another politician like Theresa May to navigate those waters, because people are, you know, people are saying it's not appropriate for her to be moralising. That's true, you know, if the democratic process has returned Donald to the White House, then that's that. And it just doesn't do anyone any good to be going, you're wicked and you need to this and that. Even if you think the chap is a wicked, terrible, terrible person. But so, you know, Theresa May has no alternative but to strike as positive a deal and as constructive a deal as relationship and deal as possible with the US, with a new president. But there is definite groundswell here of people thinking, you know, she needs to tell him he's going wrong on women's reproductive health issues, and Mike Pence is wrong on his intolerance of homosexuals, and so on and so on. Very difficult. True meaning of the word diplomacy. So the key with all of this is to cut carefully and less, not so much force but more repetition, and to let time and the file do the work. But it's quite difficult when you are going a long way down, because it does create quite a slot which has the tendency of catching. What I can do is I can just use this to just open it out at the top a little bit. But yeah, it is difficult, and some people like to start out by working up from the bottom and removing any and all surplus material, so that you're only dealing with a very short cut at the top. But it's quite hard to do that and to calculate it correctly, I found anyway. Yeah. Right on the mark, and we'll stop right there. Okay, those are those. Now we need to drop off these and work from the G outwards. So these may or may not have to go quite as far down. In fact, they don't look like they do, so let's see if we can get there without using the diamond triangular file. So what are we going for? 0.3, alright. It really is amazing how, even when you go above the actual gauge that you're using, it's amazing how quickly these strings will bind in the slot. Like I say, I made the mistake when I began doing this of buying exact matching sets, thinking you know, if you were doing a guitar with a set of 9s, you'd want to use the 9 gauge set of nut files, but of course you don't, because if you did use a 9, two things. One is theoretically, you wouldn't be able, the guitar owner wouldn't be able to fit a heavier gauge later on. They'd be constrained to just the 9s, which isn't ideal. We're on the mark. And the other thing, actually, that I found out in practice, is that the first thing that happened was 9 strings in a 9 gauge slot always stuck. Which was pretty hopeless, to be honest. So I I've quickly learned to avoid that and go above oversized, and have done ever since. And even then I still have to go back and usually work with a little bit of sandpaper to loosen it off. Now this is where it gets quite tricky, and you've got to be really careful not to overcut. And it can be just the tiniest amount of pressure in the wrong direction and you can overcut, and the likelihood of that can increase the further down a trench you are. That's the only downside of working downwards from the top. But if you through kind of instinct that you get to this point and you just ease off a little bit and take very great care, you'll get there. And now we're on that sort of 200 yards from home stretch now, the last one in the series. There we go. I'm going to take a bit off with the triangle file. Okay, and now working with the 11. Now this is really a really fine file, and this is the territory where the file is likely to bend if you're not careful. It's quite easy to bend and distort the 11 file. (7 p.m) Okay, now at 8 p.m. I'm going to take a break to listen to the next political programme, which in the UK is called Any Questions, I think it is. It's kind of the radio version of the TV programme, which is Question Time. And what's even more confusing for those who aren't in this country is that the radio version, that's good, I'm stopping right there. Am I? No, that's a little bit high. The radio version, the brother of the TV version presenter presents the radio version. I'll stop there, which is a bit weird. Right, there's my slots cut for an 8 set of things. Now, what am I ready to do now? Oh yes! Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slack these fellas off again. I could take advantage at this point to take down the slots a bit more, but take down the excess material, but I'll do that later on when it's all covered in tape. At the moment, all we've got covered is just the end bit, so I won't take it off or anything. Now I'm going to prepare this for fret leveling, and I'm going to take the marker pen and I'm going to go over all of the frets with a permanent marker, or Sharpie marker I guess it is in American style countries. Is it Sharpie here? No, this one's a Pentel. Anyway, so I'm going to draw all over these frets, and I'm going to use this pen as a sort of guide to what the fret leveling file is doing. Now on this, there's a bump there. On this job I'm going to put a new piece of sandpaper on here. I want to do that pretty much, try and do that every time. If I can afford the paper and I've got enough, I'll do that every time because it gives me a fresh start. So again, what I do is mark up the frets, drop the strings back in, and again I'm going to use my reference guitar to tune this up to, not only to pitch but also to get the vibrato unit back into its normal position. So this will take a minute or two. Okay, there's our tuning. Sorry, it took a while to achieve that. Okay, so we're kind of ready to do the leveling of the frets now, but I'm going to put this off to one side for a moment while I just prepare my fret leveling thingamajig. And it's going to be my old faithful, fairly, not narrow exactly, but this one, which is it's a combination of got the right sort of stiffness mixed with the right kind of adjustability, and you can see here with a nice blade you can kind of pretty much take off the whole of the old paper, and it's quite good because it leaves a bit of sticky behind, which will help stick the next lot on. But anyway, that's not a problem because that's also thingified, stickified. So I take it, I'm using 400 grit here. I'm going to use a cutting board of sorts, and you see, I'm going to just cut myself a strip. Try to be as economical as possible because I might as well save stuff for the next time, so I don't need anything much wider than the actual rod itself. That's all I need. Come on. And then supplies back where they belong. See, I'm in a sea of guitars here at the moment. This is a luxury position. I've got so many these old nice Strats on the go. I'm a happy bunny. So just let's get peeling the stuff off the back of this one for a minute. There we go. And I take the truss rod and just plonk it down on there. And I don't really care. I mean, I don't worry too much about where it lands as long as it sticks to the bar. And then first end I cut off is just cut it to size at this end. There's a little bit of a tear involved there, and then the rest of it is about just trimming it down the side, minding out for the piano playing tools, i.e. fingers, and then down the other side, and we've got our freshly equipped banana, or otherwise known as tunable fret leveling file with some fancy clean 400 grit. And 400 grit is pretty good because it'll do the job, but it's not so hungry that it will take too much off in one go. So it's quite gentle, but very definitely does the work. So just moving a couple of things out of the way to give myself the room. So in this pile of, I'll leave that for a minute. So in this I'm going to use my rubber string spreader and 3 little brass feet from my kit. And then I'm going to bring His Majesty Thomas Blug back again, very gently. So this is quite cool to be able to do this with the trem in place. This is the full playing position, so the trem is stabilised, it is in the position that we will play with, the neck is curved the way we play it, the way we will normally be playing it, and so I'm going to level it under its full playing conditions. So if you haven't seen this before, this is what I do. I line up my things and I look for a thing, and if I can't find a thing I look for another thing. Right, let's try this thing. Stop magnetically sticking. Is this the right thing for the thing? Yep. Okay, so first of all I'm going to slack off the thing on the truss rod. I'm going to mark, I don't need to mark these up, I'm beginning to remember where the hell these positions are. So what I do is I use the rod and I use the left, hold it down on top of this little brass thing, and I use that as my hinge, and then I go and lay it down on the other two and see where it falls. If it touches first at the far right hand side, it means that the neck is more curved than this, and the rod is straighter than the neck, and you can see that it's touching the far end and it's missing the middle altogether. So that tells me I need to put a bit of a curve into the rod, and I do it again, and again we're still not there yet. So I then use the hex key to start putting a little bit of pressure on that and the amount of adjustment is very, very tiny, and now we're getting a thing that's hitting all three at once. Okay, so that means I'm ready. If it hits all three at the same, well, sorry, the two end ones at the same time, what it tells me is the tool now maps or models or copies the curve, mirrors the curve that's in the neck. And now I take it and I gently place it in this track, or what I call the E track, and I'm just going to allow the rod to kind of coast up and down, or just move it up and down, push it gently without any downward force is mainly what I'm saying. Allow it to kind of run up and down, and then I stop and see what we've got. And the first thing it tells me is cutting this end and that end, but not in the middle. So that makes me think that it's possible that the truss rod is not as curved as the neck yet, because it's only cutting the end. So I'm just going to reposition everything, and I'm calibrating again in the same places to double check what I did before. And lo and behold, some of that curve is undone, just a tiny bit. So I've just undone it again. I'm just going to tighten it again a bit more to make sure that we've got it on the mark. Okay, now it's touching again. So that was a good call to recalibrate, and in finding that out, it hasn't done any major damage. It's just kind of started touching the tops of the frets, which we're going to need to do anyway. So then when I put it back on this time, it starts to show me that it's cutting right towards the middle as well, straight away, and I get right to the edge, back to the middle and stop, and then again recheck. And so what I can see is now cutting everywhere, maybe missing that one, but pretty much everywhere. So remember from before, at this action that I'd set, this 1mm, played everything, so all the notes play. What we were finding, if you remember, choking around when we were bending, there you go, big bends, chokes. So it's going to be quite tricky because I forgot to measure the radius. But this is a fairly curved radius, and so it's always going to be tricky to do big bends on the curved radius. The more curved it is, like a 7.25, you really are constrained with ultimately the lowness of the action you can have, because I did a video, you can check back actually if you look on the thingy, there's a video in there about bends and radii, I think it's called, or choking notes and radii, or bends choking on tight radii, or something like that. You'll see it. It's a recent video, and explains why the more curved the radius of the guitar is, the more impossible it is to bend something uphill across the radius and to still have it come back down the other side and not choke out, no matter how low you set your action. So there is basically a limit. Now what we know about this is, if we just look at this logically, the notes are playing, but if I bend this E string now right into what I would say is the G, or even towards the D slot or track if you like, it's now starting to choke that and not play. So I'm just going to recalibrate this again just to make sure, because I'm going to keep the same calibration for the next track. But that's the challenge of a tight radius guitar, and it, you know, it can be difficult when somebody has a guitar with this kind of radius and wants an unbelievably low action, and there's a kind of, ultimately there's a sort of constraint of almost like physics starts to limit what is possible. And actually if you go and look in my that video I referenced, the diagram, I hadn't really thought it out before I drew the diagram to explain it, but the diagram does pose, the drawing I did does kind of start to suggest actually why it's really difficult to do, and it's really interesting to kind of imagine it, try and get your head around how you're bending a string uphill, but it's then at the top, which if it went in straight line to the G position, that E should play fine, but it's not going to the G, it's going back down to a lower point, which means it's being dragged back downhill, which means it's going to hit a high part of the fret, because anyway, if you see the diagram you'll kind of start to get it, and if you've ever thought about it I think you'll probably start to get what I mean. So it's quite challenging, and actually ultimately it isn't possible to to go below a certain action on a very tight radius. So if this is a 7.25 and I haven't checked, we may find, see, we need a little bit more on this B track and then we move to the G. But yeah, we may find that we have to just, ultimately what happens is you may have to sacrifice the target of 1mm at the last fret on the high E, which is no terrible thing. I mean, you go to 1.1 or 1.2 and actually from a player's perspective it hardly feels any different, but it will solve the problem. Now I'm going to calibrate for the G track, and this is one where I expect to make some difference. Just remember what we heard. We had the E string choking out when we bent it across into the G track. Now I'm calibrating to see if this truss rod, or the banana tool as I like to call it, now in a sense that's showing me that it's a little bit over curved, if anything. So I'm just going to slack off the most infinitesimally small amount, and it really is, because before you even breathe on it, it's clearing the middle, but that's about right actually. So G out, spread the string, and now I'm going to let this run in the G track, and again all the time I'm looking to see that it's cutting the way I'd expect. You know, if I've got it the curve mapped, I do expect to see it pretty much cutting all the way across the neck. I mean all the way the length of the neck. I don't expect to see a gap or all in the middle, and if I do then I immediately stop and recalibrate, and I suspect that perhaps something is wrong with my calibration. But here we know that the choking is happening now into the G track with the E string, and we know it isn't because there's particularly a high fret here. We know that it's more than likely because there's you know, the geometry of this thing. We got further, and as we go across into the D, it's almost impossible because we're going uphill and backwards. If you think of the dynamics of this, right? We're pushing the E string uphill to the top, the peak of this radius, right? Then it's going back down to a low point down here. Now if it was going straight to the high point up here that matches on the saddle, then you'd expect a little gap, bigger gap, and so on, and it would to play. But what's happening is it's going back down to a low point, but it's at a high point, and actually the low point is so much lower that it cancels out the clearance that you would expect there if its anchor point or its end point was up here. And actually once you go past the top of the fret, there's no way you're going to get it to play, because it's coming up the hill on this side and it's going back down that side. There's no clearance at all. So and that's, if you raise the bridge saddles, then you will eventually clear that and it will still play, but it basically is an inherent limitation that you can't go beyond. It's the centre. If you can see it, we can play pretty much to the centre of the neck, and we could take it, we'll probably end up going up to 1.1 on those, or tiny, about 0.1 of an increase on those strings. But what you can't do, and what you can do with the 8s, is you can bend it all the way to the other side, but what that starts to do is it starts to make it almost impossible for you to have the lowest of low actions, which we're currently putting in here. So the reality is I'm pushing the action on this guitar very hard, as kind of requested, to get it as low as it can be. But like I said, we're going to have to compromise-ish at some point because of the fact that we can bend the 8s further than pretty much any other kind of string. That's a challenge that's going against us. And then the fact that a tight radius or a rounded radius is always going to choke off bends beyond a certain part of the radius. If you're going up the hill, the best you're going to get is it will play at the top of the hill if you've got your fret absolutely leveled. But the minute you start taking the string over the hill and expecting it to come up over the hill and then back down to the anchor point on the other side, it just becomes nigh on impossible, and you just won't get it to play. And we'd have to accept it, that on a curved radius you just can't have ridiculously. We're nearly at it with the B, but the E can't. The E's got too far. It's too far to go. If it was a flat radius, these would be in a flat line, and actually the differential in height wouldn't be so great. So even when this one's right over there, it's only going a little bit further down. But this is because we've got it as a curved radius. It's going a long way down. So we are going to have to raise the action to get away with playing on this kind of radius. But it'll still be lower than it was. But as I say, what I'm doing now is I'm really pushing it within an inch of its little guitar-y life. Okay, so I'm now going to measure or calibrate for the A track, and we now are a little bit over curved, so slack off a tiny bit. So the next stage after this, once I've done this leveling, is to reprofile the frets, so that the flat spots that I've made on some of these frets we'll just round off, and then we kind of reshape it so that the frets are back to a nice arch form sort of shape, nice smooth arch form, and that ensures that they are easy or smooth to play, but it also very importantly makes sure that the intonation point on the fret is where it should be, in the dead center, top dead center of the fret. If you left it as a flat spot, it would the intonation point, or the point of intonation, would move forward towards the bridge, and that actually, if the flat spot is more than about 1 millimeter wide, which it is just about on these here, that can throw out your intonation so that it starts to not play as well as it should. So it's not just cosmetic or feel that we do the reprofiling, it's to ensure that the intonation is very accurate, as well as obviously making it a nice arch form so it plays properly. Okay, so I'm just pretty much done on this. I'm not going to overkill. Now I do know that this, by the way, this low E was struggling to play at a very low action on its own, and I can see it's because there's some low frets in the mix here, and I can't tell you technically how that happens. But it's better than it was. But again, we may have to compromise anyway on this overall ridiculously low action, because we're on just a millimeter there. What the diagnosis, if you think back, the question I could have asked, or didn't ask, but I might have asked right at the beginning, was, I mentioned at the beginning, was why have we got an action of 2 millimeters on the last fret on the low E, and everything else is around about 1.5. And if there's ever a differential like that, it's usually deliberate, and then there's usually a reason for it. And in this case, the reason is because there are clearly 1 or 2 substantially low frets in the mix here. And those low frets make high frets. So a low fret makes the adjacent fret high, and that chokes off. And that's what's been happening with this low E. So we can make it play, but what I don't want to do, and this is where you get a judgment call, is I don't want to have to carve everything right the way down to free up this low fret, and I don't quite know why it's a low fret. I'll do a little bit more, but then I'm going to stop, and if we have to compromise by going a tiny bit up on the action, we will. But it's a quirk of manufacture. Something's happened so that fret's been either pushed in harder than the others. In some guitars that I get, it's because they've been worked on by somebody in the past, and as a result they're more, perhaps somebody's done some spot leveling with a piece of sandpaper and a fret rubber or something, and they've solved a particular problem, but then they've created a new low spot, and when they do that, what we're left with is low frets, and I can see them here. I've taken quite a lot off these frets here, and these are untouched, so it tells me there's 3 low frets here, which will cause the frets around here to be the next ones to be high. So it's a problem. Okay, so here we go. We have a really low action. Okay, this is all very, very low. I'm going to carry on working at this level, but bearing in mind I suspect we will just back off a tiny bit on what we've aimed at right now, but let's just double check. I mean, in a sense, in a good way, we've aimed very low. Okay, yeah, 1.5 at the very last fret, which, as I said, on a tight radius like this is a pretty unusual or pretty challenging thing. So I'm going to take these strings off now because they've done their service. Now obviously what happens as we take the strings off, the neck's going to relax and flatten out a bit because the strings are no longer pulling it. Also what will happen, of course, is that the tremolo plate falls back against the body, which is what we'd expect. Once we replace with the next set of 8s, we'll get the trem will pull up to the same amount and the same position as before. I don't regularly use 8s, so I'm going to cut these and bin them rather than pull them and save them, which I often do, but they're not needed. What I will do is just check the gauge of the last one here, because what we're looking at on the pack here, we're looking at 38s as the final one. I just want to make sure it is the same across the set. 95 millimeters. Yeah, 38. Okay, so it is the same, basically the same gauge all the way through. Now, what you can probably see if you were looking close up now, you'd see quite a lot of work on these frets, and it is because, you know, the brief was to lower the action so that Drew's bends were less. There's less space for his fingers to get caught under. So we've done that, and we've done it as far as it will go. I'm just going to sort of get some of the dust off. We've done it as far as it will go, and the next stage is now to reprofile these out into a nice playable shape and polish them up again, and then we'll see whether we'd need to make a tiny adjustment in the action going upwards. I suspect we will, just by virtue of playing with a tight radius like this. Let's just double check. Yeah, this is 7.25, you see. That's practically 7. It's not. Yeah, or it might even, it's somewhere between. Realistically, it's like an 8. An 8 is not a 9.5, it's quite a way off a 9.5. Yeah, but it's a little bit flatter than a 7.25. So it's a vintage, it's a custom vintage radius, and obviously it means that you just won't get bends out of a 1mm action. It's just the way it is. But we'll do our best. So next step on this is to repaint the frets again, so we can do the reprofiling thing. Now we can either use, these are medium frets, they're not jumbo, so we can use the medium side on my StewMac thingamajig. I think it's normally, if I just use that tool, and I'll try it on this, they're not very tall frets anyway, so I mean that's one of the other things is when I was listening to or reading what Drew was saying, sometimes if the frets themselves aren't very high to begin with, it can be a struggle. You're not getting much behind them, and it can feel like you're pound for pound you're not getting much grip and you're pushing and you're bending, and then you're coming into contact with the other strings which are trying to high enough to want to go over the top. One of the ways to improve the kind of resistance or the directness of the bend is to have higher frets to begin with, because then there's more of your finger pad that goes underneath to get behind the string you're pushing. So, but that isn't what we've got here. Let me just see what this looks like in this tool. Is it gonna get to all of these spots comfortably? I'm just doing a quick sort of diagnostic whiz to see what the work it's got to do and whether it's going to do it, or whether we need to use a sort of more manual method. I think it'll get to it. It's quite a lot of working to do, but I'm just getting a view of it. So what this file does to begin with is just shading the edges of the flat spot and highlighting them because they've just gone shiny effectively. So it shows me the amount of marker pen that's sitting on the top, which I have to work inwards by doing more work to round off. That's not too bad. I'll save you the boredom of it and I'll stop it. What I will do also while this is off, I've got to be careful with this because this is an aged guitar and I don't want to clean it up if I'm cleaning up Thomas Blug stuff, so I have to be careful that I don't over clean it. What I'll do is now, let's see what I'm going to do. I could get up the, is there any bite? There's a bit of bite left in here. So what I would want to do now is I want to take off the excess material on this nut. So I'm using I'm using a file that I would have used in the past for fret leveling, but because I don't use it for that anymore, see, that's why I put paper on there. I'm just using it to take off some of this excess material, hence the paper to sort of protect things so I don't take off anything I don't want to do. But that will take a while. I can basically go down until there's just enough to hold the strings in place, and I'll try and do a bit with this and see what we can do. Smell of burning bones. Right, so that's not bad for a sanding drum that's got practically nothing on it to do any sanding with. So what I'm just going to do, Morris, I'm going to shoot this. See this? Don't be frightened. Good boy. I always give Morris a little heads up, ears up. So that's taken it down quite a bit, but then I can just get this and take a little bit more off, sort of flatten it a bit more. Because the Dremel tends to leave lots of hummocks behind, and this tends to flatten it quite nicely and allows me to really skim it down. But it's still quite deep, relatively speaking, so there's quite a lot more material I could take off if I want to be really finicky about it. But just keeping an eye that I don't go so far that we lose any of the slots or their functionality. There we go. That looks quite nice. I'll stop there. There's a little bit of rounding off to do and stuff. And then I'll make sure, obviously with sandpaper, I make sure that these slots work perfectly well. Alright, so I'll stop and see you when I've done all of these reprofiling, but the point is, just to let you know, what I do is I take the thing and I just work this file over the top of the fret until it just cuts away at the sharp flat edges. It doesn't take long actually. It just cuts inwards until it rounds those edges off, and until it leaves what I'm aiming for is a very thin strip of marker pen down the centre of the fret, and that tells me that I've rounded it off and left the top untouched. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute when that's done. Okay, just joining me back while I've got all of this masked off, ready for the fun and games that is polishing the frets out. Now I've got myself some fantastic new sandpaper, so I'm all kind of kitted up. 600, 1000, 1500. So I shall chop this up, work my way through that. I won't bore you with it, so I'll switch off again. Anyway, it's a political, any question, no, question time, or whatever it's called. Question time, any questions? So I'll get on with that, and I'll do all those 3 grades of paper, followed by micro mesh, followed by a run over with chrome cleaner as a final thing, and that, my beauties, will be fret polishing malarkey. And once that's done, we'll be ready to restring, tune it up, stretch out all the slack, check the nut slots, double check the intonation, and then do final tweaks to the actual playing action, which will need to go possibly up a tiny bit. We'll see how it feels when we get there. I'm just putting this, stacking this ready for another job on another guitar. Just keep that little set there ready to be reused. Oops, stay. Okay, so yeah, boring. It takes about half an hour, this next part of the process, so you'll be pleased to see me on the other side of it when I'll have taken all this paper off, shined all these up. I'll have cleaned with, use a bit of, carefully use a bit of solvent to clean the fingerboard, get all the dust and everything out of it, and then I'll oil the fingerboard, then chuck new strings on. Just one thing I remember from too many times in the past getting it wrong. If you are ever doing a Wilkinson guitar with Wilkinson pickups and you're taping it off, put a piece of paper over the silver Wilkinson letters before you go anywhere near it with tape, because masking tape or anything will pull those little pesky silver letters right off the pickups. They come off very, very easily, and it's I saw them flashing there at me with their little insulting, challenging little eye winking at me, and I thought, you're challenging me to pull you off and give Drew back his guitar without the lettering on the pickups. It's so easy to do, so just be cautious. Wilkinson with the silver lettering on it, cover them over with something before you put the tape on so the tape doesn't touch them. Alright, see you in a minute. Okay, just to wrap up, sorry I jumped ahead now because I had to listen to that, all that political stuff, apologies. So look, I have restrung, tuned up to pitch, checked everything out, and had a close look at the action, and what the conclusion is, basically, on a 7.25 radius guitar like this, you cannot make bends that cross the middle point, which is what you're tempted to do with an 8 gauge string. You can't make bends cross the middle point on a 7.25 at 1mm action down there. Okay, you see this, if you get the drift, you're going over the middle, right, and you're going over to the other side, or you can't get to the middle even, because on a 7.5 tight radius, that drop down there is too great that the clearance here disappears, and actually the truth is no amount of fret leveling will ever get you to that point. So what we've got 0.25 millimeters over the first fret on all the strings, actually a little tiny tad higher on the last, a little bit of a gradient, but just about from 0.3 to 0.25 over the first fret. We've got, now what we've got is 1.5, let's see what this is actually sitting at. I've done on the low E, I've done just under, actually that doesn't need to be quite that high, just under 2, between 1.5 and 2, so 1.75 on this one, because we're not going to bend that one, so it's not a problem. Just get it right. And then what I've done is I've just made the high E step out slightly compared to the rest of them. So the high E is running at what we're looking at there. The high E is running at 2 millimeters, as it the opposite, in fact, from what it was the other way round. So what I've done, just for interest, I've taken this tricky spot, and now if the reality of this setup is, if you want a guitar that you can bend that's 4 stops. On a tight radius like this, if you want 4 stops, right, you're going past the middle point, which means you're out of any clearance there pretty much. So if you want those 4 stops, there's no alternative. You have to have a 0.2mm action on the high E down at that end. Now it's slightly different. As you come in, you can play lower because they're obviously going directly over this high point, and therefore the clearance is enough. So you can go with that. The B is comfortably at, what's this, 0.1, where are we at? Yeah, you know, just about 0.14. But again, you see, you're over the other side, you just run out. You can't make those bends without taking this up. You'd have to go up, and it's not about fret leveling at this point now because we've leveled those frets. This is about the dynamics of something going up over a tight radius and over the other side to a low point. And it's physically impossible. Okay, so I don't know really what to suggest other than, you know, the only way you can see this work. If you want this to work, I'll give you a visual example. To make this bendable to any amount you want, this also has to be at the sort of level of about 2. Now, you know, what you wanted was down on what it originally was, and I aimed to get it down to, you know, started just with 1 at my target point. So you can see that's the sort of physics getting in your way. That's all out of tune at the moment, but yeah, it's a really tricky one, Drew, and you know the 7.25 is just the problem here. You know, in terms of actually playing all the way, this guitar plays beautifully well. Well, plays effectively at the 1mm action that we set in the first place and headed for as I wind these down again. But yeah, there's a kind of limit. So you've got individual notes playing all the way up. So, you know, you play up to, you play a tone, barely getting across there, you know, and that's the absolute lowest you can be on this. We are looking at, get my eyeballs tuned in, you know, that's 1.2, 1.3, that's the absolute lowest, and on the same, you know, we're 2 on the outside on the high E. That's it, that's your limit. So I'm going to stop there because, as I say, I can't make it any lower than that. So we're going 2, 1.3, and then we're going a bit lower as we get over here. Yep. I'll tune it up. There we go. That's That's the conclusion you have to draw, I'm afraid, of a 7.25 bending on a 7.25 radius. There you go. Yeah, that's the kind of limitations, statute of limitation. No, it really is. That's about as good as you're going to get with leveled frets, precision leveled frets in the playing position. Beyond that, we can't beat science. And you know, go and look at that if you want to see more about that. Have a look at the video where I did explained it with sort of three-dimensional diagram, looking down the neck and looking at this radius. It's kind of impossible to go down hill, uphill, downhill, and do it on a tight radius like this and get clearance. Especially if you go over the other side, you're going down. You're starting from a low point. You're expecting the string to hit this point here and then come down over the other side. It's going up, and then down again in 3 dimensions. It's kind of impossible, and that's just the nature of this curve. So the only way to really free this up is to bring these edges up a little bit, which in effect with the strings you're simulating, or with the bridge you're simulating a flatter radius. There you go. We'll a bit later on I will check the intonation, but apart from that, well, I'll do it now actually while we've got the thing out and while we're still on the case. Let's check the intonation, and I'll just put a strap on, and then once we've done that, we are finished. So it's an interesting one. It's not, you can tell it's not often that I get to work on 7.25 radii, and I've got a similar situation actually with my favourite of all favourite necks, which is the Maple X Graham RIP neck. I thought that was relicking, but it's not, it's dirt. I'll take that off. Anyway, yeah, so that's the kind of, we've hit the limits, and the same, as I say, same with my maple. What am I looking for? I'm looking for the leaf. Same with my maple neck. It is a 7.25 or close to, and as a result, I just have to settle for it being a little higher than I would do, and that's, you know, we are at the limits of what you can do with a radius such as that. Okay, so I'm going to get my tuner hooked up there. I'm going to get this thing loaded, and I'm going to get a clean tone, no effects, nothing untoward. Okay, and we need a nice screwdriver for the adjustment of. So intonation, 12th fret, harmonic ping, tuned. I'll do a couple here. Harmonic ping, fret it a few times. Pretty well set, I think. Would expect it to be. this, by the way, is, as I always say, depends on how you press. So no two people ever press with the same strength. So this is purely it's a purely subjective kind of activity when you do this, because somebody will press harder and get a different result. The only one that seemed a little bit out to me at all harder is the A, a little bit long, yes, so I'll shorten it a tiny fraction and just see. Let's get that t'other screwdriver. So shorten it, push it away, try it. I'm going to go over the slots with a sandpaper because I think I felt a tiny ping there. So I'll do a little bit of sandpaper to the edge of the slots, and I'll put some graphite in there. Pretty intonated as it stands, which is no surprise. So that's good. Right, there we go. Last tiny little bit will be to just actually I think it'll I'll just do a little check with a tiny bit of sandpaper and the slots, and then I'll put some that graphite stuff in there, and we'll be done. So thank you for watching this. we'll live and learn. So we learned a little something about the limits of a 7.25 radius neck, which is kind of no surprise really. But there we go. We've seen what it can do and how far it can't go beyond that. So I'll see you for another one. So thanks for watching, and this is Sam, who loves guitars, and wishing you a good weekend wherever you are, including you, George, over there in Piney Woods in Texas, East Texas I should say. So have a great weekend.